about size. You can tell them that you've done $100 million building, $200 million building, but the simple way of talking about size, I think, also needs to change. And in the same way now, for when Singapore is only 50 years, so both of us work with Tank 1B. When all our first projects were 40 million, 100 million, and actually it was only just Tank 1B and me or him doing these projects. And then you realize that if you are really interested in something, buildings take time to build. Building takes a lot of people, because it takes ambitions. So every situation, if you are interested and you are focused, it is definitely something that you can grow. And actually, if you have an interest, you will really make something quite personal. So it's not really about size, because Guanbi's projects is almost all demolished. But if you go, you will feel something, because you have this feeling that someone thought about it. And I think that's one way. I mean, at the same time, I also began by talking about the HDB, right, which was really premised on efficiency and a few things, but it was really the most generic idea, right? So everybody stays in the same flat. But actually, every flat is different because it has a different relationship to the sun, or the rain, or family, or something. So maybe it's not also about, I mean, there's a few ways to take this, but living already allows you to be, right? So then why are we so scared to discuss and frame things in relation to size, when we know that we are so capable of doing something? In the most generic HDB, if you go to every interior, it's already so rich, because the people who stay in make it rich. So if you are given a project, would you not make it something? I mean, that's so simple and it's so basic, and all the most interesting books or stories or buildings were built very with the most primitive means. Right? It's not about the checklist or the tools. All the great buildings that you visited were built even with different kind of understanding of technology, and maybe more sophisticated.
So I'm also very interested in the periphery, the inside and outside, because both actually feature very strongly in both the project about letting the outside in and inside out, and yet there's a sense of privacy. And back to the question of HDB, I'm also a lover of HDB. I think what is most intrigued me is not about the interior of HDB, but the common corridors. I actually love common corridors rather than the newer HDBs where the common corridor disappear. The common corridor is actually very rich kind of space, and you see people taking over in the space of the corridor and extend the daily living into the space. And the sense of aesthetics, the contemporary sense of aesthetic, or rather the trend, is that they're having a very neat form of architecture. Well, of course, in both the projects, there seems to be no concern, if I may use the word, for this neatness. In fact, it's a kind of deliberate casualness about things, about space, and letting the space speak for itself and the user adapt for it. So is this something that is fair for me to comment?
It also shows your, I mean, the term tidy, neat, actually, it's, if you know why it's there, then it has a purpose actually. And of course, there is this idea that it should be there, and that's why we call it neat or untidy. But it's the same also in relation to plants or planting that is planted pervasively in Singapore, right? We actually don't know what the role of that, or not to say role, but what that thing, the tree, or what it could do, or how it could be. So if we knew it, then, a tree grows, but if every other person would say do something to the tree. But that is not because of the tree, that's because of our idea that it should be like something. It's the same with a child playing at the playground, right? You should play there, but if you are playing, you play. And in a way, if this corridor is some place that you walk and you have something that you want to put, someone else may not like. So same, my neighbor, every time there's something that we put out, or she would wash, It's a big thing. But from my kitchen where I hang up my clothes, when I look out at her little ledge, right, it's filled with the koyok. So it's like this perverse world of super neat in front, but behind it's really something. But I'm trying to say is that there actually are different reasons or different. If you understand different things as you walk, the word need not appear because it's already because of the person's interest or liking, or because the tree needs to go this way. And then it's actually understanding or knowledge rather than this idea of order. And order is very much associated with architecture. I mean, the whole education that I had was to understand what it meant to design, that you must have a concept, that you must arrange, and then that is the whole point. And then if you make a beautiful plan, I mean, it's one of the joys of architecture, right? To make a beautiful plan, and it's not well, that's still already provincial because you all want to make a beautiful 3D, I suppose, right? But to me, that was like, wow, the biggest thrill of my life when you can make a plan that is like organizes things. But then you also realize the plan is a starter, it's a potential for relationships, and I think that's also that's the great thing of architecture, that you really have the potential to set up this kind of world.
I think the approach that we have for architecture is very much not finite in terms of planning and also in terms of finishes. The things are meant to weather and grow, and they evolve with time. Back to the comment on HDB flats, I think currently we are going too far to be too exclusive. Because we used to stay, in kampong settings, everywhere is free. You walk through your neighbor's house, the doors are open. And then when we move to HDB flat, it's one grade down. We have doors, but we keep the doors closed most of the time. But we still have the corridors and the void decks. But when it comes to condominiums, the fences are up, it's gated and bounded, and to enter a house, basically, there are exclusive lift lobbies where you go straight to your unit without even having to meet your neighbors. So it's a very clear sign of how we have evolved as a so-called developed nation. Yeah, and I hope maybe developers will see some light in this aspect.
Indeed, I think we have moved very far away from communal living. Even for HDB, the early days of HDBs, the place where we hang the clothes is actually in the corridor, common corridor, in the early HDB and SIT flats. And subsequently, actually, architects and planners actually move it back to the kitchen. The idea of having clothes hanging in the corridor is that when you hang things up, you need to collect when it's dry, and you have to keep moving into and use the space in the corridor, and that's where chance encounter with neighbors and community will happen. But of course, we are getting more and more exclusive, and we're retreating into our little private zones, and the kind of communal living is somewhat missing. With that, I would like to open the floor up for questions. If there's any questions you want to ask Ling Hao and Yong-Ter?
I have two questions. I think the first one was briefly asked but never fully answered. I think both of you essentially run extremely small offices, either with few employees or just primarily solo practitioners. But I think in my head, you guys are generally solo practitioners. So maybe you could speak something about your choice to do every single thing alone, the kind of control or autonomy it gives you versus the difficulties. The second one is that both of you seem to do very personal, I wouldn't call it personal work, but more like in doing what you do, how often do you run up against regulations, planning or building regulations, and the struggles involved with that while building your things?
For me, company size has always been either doubled or shrunk by half, because it's either with another staff or without. And it's intentional in a way, it's an intentional strategy to go with the flow of things. So it depends on the size of projects that come along the way. So sometimes I rather do a toilet that's inspiring, uplifting, than to take something that's whereby the brief calls for something very mediocre. Or, so in regards to your second question, land regulations. Yeah, we all have to meet regulations, whether regardless of the size of project.
Yeah, it's all my projects don't get PPs for the last. I don't have PPs for the last 10 years. I don't know why, because I really think regulations are really straightforward, and I think actually it's more the people understanding your drawings and. Anyway, so it's something that you have encountered. And I, practicing in this region, like I also am now starting some project in Malaysia. In a way, as a region, Singapore is really quite transparent in terms of the directions that you can go with each step. So you just have to be patient. And as to the size of, I think, of course, we both like to have relationships with people to work with. We have also, for me anyway, a memory for me of working with N1B. So my idea of working with someone would be that I really want to learn something from you. So if you are able to do that, that's why you want to work with someone. I just never had the opportunity to be able to, have this kind of projects to do so. Because projects take time. We obviously don't do so many projects, and the cost is always just not possible. That's the simplest proof in this. This is the strange thing about this economy. There is now so much construction, right? But construction cost is actually getting lesser and lesser because the money goes into the land price. Like if they buy a land for 1 million or 1.5 million, the construction cost becomes less. Yeah. And then also, to be honest, I think fees are also getting very low. I don't know, because every time I quote some project, the builders don't get it. If I want a fee, I can pay someone. So that means that if you do smaller projects, so-called smaller projects, or more personal projects where you spend time, then you need to spend time, right? And then you spend time, you can't really afford to pay someone so much. I mean, that's our particular economy. And I think it's different in different countries, because different ideas of money also. Here the ideas of, also less and less people work for less.
My question is, has the way you think about design or practice changed over the years from when you started working until now?
Yes. I mean, we showed you our work. I showed you. I now think that actually, of course, things that you will like from maybe a long time ago. Maybe a lot of things that we learned when we're very young do affect us. So that's why I also didn't think that the architecture that you make is so important, because maybe it affects some people, because some people just couldn't care. So I am now really interested in what I'm interested in. I really want to do more of that kind of work. So maybe in the order when I first started working, yes, of course, you really just want to try and experiment your ideas, right? So now it gets harder, but you also want to try something more. So every project is always still a kind of experiment.
Any other questions from the floor? So maybe I have a question. In a way, you know, because of some of the answers you've given, the nature of the practice, and especially Yong-Ter said that the faith that the client has in you. To a certain extent, the impression I get is that most of the time, clients come looking for you, both of you, right? And if you were to look for projects, so what are avenues in your practice that you go around soliciting for projects?
Actually, for the first few projects, the clients had little faith in me because I have no track record. So at the beginning, it's the toughest for any young architect because you have to build from scratch. But that's also the time where you start building and be true to yourself and be committed in what you believe in and stay true to what you stand for. And from there, you build up your track record. And from there, you attract the clients that would kind of believe in what you stand for.
I think that's a very apt statement and encouragement to all young architects or young architects of future. And is there any question? Without further ado, right, I would thank you everyone for attending today's conversation with Ling Hao and Yong-Ter. Let us give them a round of applause. Thank you. I hope that stay tuned to our email mailers and for our next installment of the architecture conversation. Thank you.